We are getting started for our next game dev roundtable here on the Game Wisdom channel. We have a great cast and another panel lined up for you this month. We have a newcomer to the cast this time. Please welcome everybody, Seth Goldberg. How are you doing?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
Not a problem. For those of you who are repeated viewers, unfortunately, Jack is in the middle of his teaching or his teaching curriculum, or what I forget how we describe schools. It's been such a long time since I've been in school, whatever that is. So he is going to be away until at least December, I believe. But we'll be happy to have him back when he is done teaching. But as for everyone else, before we get started with our discussion, we're going to give everybody a chance to once again introduce themselves for those of you new to the table. So we'll start with myself, and then we'll go to Tomo, Seth, Ramin, and Shark to round things out. So, as always, I am Josh Bycer, the owner and writer here at Game Wisdom. I talk about game design, and I also am a multi-book author at this point, with 4 books out, and I just got the confirmation for book number 5 on free-to-play design, which means I'll be chatting with Ramin probably a whole lot in the coming 4 to 5 months. But that's it for me, so up to Tomo.
Hi everybody, my name is Tomo Moriwaki. I've been a game designer for a couple decades. And in the most recent decade, I started a small company called Hyperkinetic Studios, and we have a game internal to that studio called Epic Tavern that's all about fantasy storytelling.
All right, over to Seth.
I'm Seth Goldberg. I'm a former game developer and designer for both board games and computer games. I specialized kind of in the early MMO world. Then I moved on to build my own studio doing social gaming. Now I work with other indies in promotion, testing, various services for the indies, and I run the Strategy Informer, where I do game reviews. Mostly in strategy, of course.
All right, great to have you. And over to Ramin.
My name is Ramin Shokrizad. I've been pioneering the fields of game economics and game neuroeconomics since 2005. I've got over 100 articles on Gamasutra and Gameful. My specialty is the metagame design for very complex, massively multiplayer online games, especially ones with economies. And right now I'm building blockchain enabled MMOs that allow play-to-earn mechanics to be supported by the developer.
Hello everybody, I'm Sharky Shark, also known as Jim Tankersley, and I'm the CEO of Nexus Games. We're a very, very small studio making what is a very big game right now of Neon Continuum, which is a grid-based CCG that is themed around sci-fi, with the heart of it being cyberpunk.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And I think either I typed it wrong. I think we may have misspelled Seth's last name. It's ERG. I'm sorry about that, Seth.
Yep, it's ERG.
Not a problem. We will get that corrected for next time.
Does that ultimately mean mountain, not city?
There we go. But it is great to have everybody on, and congratulations, Ramin, for your game announcement. He finally did the big reveal as of, I believe, a few days ago at the time of this stream. You'll find links to the announcement as well as to his Discord channel in the description down below. And as always, you'll find links to everybody's social media and such in that description. So, we have not spoken about Warframe yet, but it is a major part of our discussion, or games like it. So, I think with introductions over, let's get to our topic, and that is long-tail game design. Or, for those of you who aren't familiar with that kind of concept, this is just another way of describing kind of games as a service, or very long-term post-launch support of a game. Now, this is something that for the crew here, I know everyone is very much interested in this topic because it has become a major way of changing how games are designed and balanced, especially over the last decade. Now, if we were being I guess, like, very wide in terms of our definition, we could have said that this kind of design started with kind of the rise of the MMOs, your EverQuest, World of Warcrafts, and so on. But in terms of, I think, of when people started to think about launching and releasing games as this kind of long-term support, we could really turn to like 2007, 2008 with Team Fortress and League of Legends. And just this change in focus of, in the old days, or quote-unquote old days, you release a game, as long as it doesn't break somebody's computer, it's done outside of releasing an expansion or, little bit of patchwork. Today, people have come to expect months, if not years, of support of games. And it has really radically changed everything from mobile and free-to-play games to even like AAA single-player titles. People want to know that this game is not done. They want to see, more stories. They want more outfits and levels and whatnot. And it's really caused a weird or interesting discussion about what it means to support a game these days. And I'm sure we'll bring up something like No Man's Sky and, of course, Warframe later on. So, I guess my first question for everyone, this will also be for the audience watching live or recorded. What do you think about this trend? This idea that people don't expect a game to be done at 1.0. And do you like it, dislike it, or are you somewhere in the middle? And since we went in kind of, I guess, a clockwise order, we'll go counterclockwise first. So we'll start with Shark this time.
So I think I fall somewhere in the middle kind of thing because, like, if you have, like, no game in theory is done at 1.0 because you haven't tested it in a wide market. You haven't tested it in, you probably tested it with small groups, hopefully bigger, groups, but like you haven't tested it with your entire audience. Hence, there's going to be bugs that aren't found, stuff like this. There's going to be, maybe some game breaking, not necessarily bugs, but, ways to take advantage in the game that you probably don't want in there. You want to get those out, all kinds of different things along that lines. But there could be a lot farther than that, when you're talking about a live service or anything like that, because a live service has to continuously put out content. But just in general, I think that those two things are like a bare minimum kind of thing for you to keep on upgrading. And, but it goes farther from there.
All right. Over to Ramin.
Are you asking if I like long tail games as a player or as a developer?
I would say as a developer. What do you think about it?
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm a huge fan of long tail because the longer a player, my primary goal in making a game that can be played for 3+ years, and that's my goal for every game I make, is I want them to enjoy playing and paying for 3+ years. It makes it worth my while to make that extra effort to make something really fantastic if I know that my players are going to be paying me for 3+ years instead of just once. So then I make content that feels fresh every time they log in, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about all the different ways that can be done.
All right. Over to Seth.
Well, of course it depends on the genre of the game. Obviously, if you have a tower defense game, there's no reason to build in a ton of long tail content. But if you're looking at an online service, something with a live operation, something with a mobile operations, something with a massive player base, then I really, really enjoy it. But I like the emergence of long tail gaming into more of a single player mode. I believe, we in our internal discussions mentioned Deathloop as the roguelike of in the example of long tail gaming, or was it Dead Cells that you mentioned?
Yeah, it was Dead Cells. I just got its 24th update as of I think a few days ago.
Okay. So, the ability to pack on those updates, keep people playing them, and potentially increase the universe and the world building with the marketing of DLC at that point. Free updates are great too, but from a development standpoint, being able to do a long tail on the sales of the game is nice as well. I think publishers would really go for that as well, which would help out the developers get the titles to market.
All right, and Tomo?
So, I feel like as a small developer, there's some complexities to kind of trying to pursue the long tail design for player, long tail inexperience, long-term service, like all those things are higher difficulty at least. And but I just wanted to lead with that because kind of as a creative and as a consumer of games, I'm like totally all in for the long-term experience, both and for the same reasons, really. It's that the kind of a long story has more opportunity to try interesting things, and you get to have all this fun making. Doing long setups is not. It's not something you get to do a lot in everyday life, and you got to start doing it if you intend to get any good at it. So, kind of creating content for a long period of time is really stimulating and interesting space. And then, I think we all know that the games we like the most are the ones that we put the most time into.
All right. And for myself, as a consumer and as somebody who's been paying attention to all these games, I think I'm more in the positive than I would be in the negative column. I think it opens up the games that do well to kind of keep mining for gold, in a manner of speaking. Again, we mentioned Dead Cells a few minutes ago. Dead Cells was an amazing game at launch, and it has only gotten better. I was just looking up a game that we played, I think it was late last year, Star Renegades, which was by developers of Halcyon 6. And that game has received many, many updates since it originally launched, adding in more missions, more characters, more events. And of course, as we've said, the whole idea of supporting these games for years has also given developers, it affords them the chance to keep working on a project that they really, really like. Now, with that said, though, I think there are a few issues. I'm curious what everyone thinks about with this. I guess the first one, from a single-player or a linear game standpoint. Going back to Star Renegades for a second, it's a game that I keep wanting to play, but every time I think about starting it up, I just think, well, what if there's another major DLC patch? What if there's some new event or content that's coming next month, 2 months, whatever? Why should I play the game, in its unfinished state? And to Rat's Tail's comment from earlier about not liking games that aren't considered done, it's definitely that very weird concern that, you are playing the unpolished or unrefined version of this game, and that at some point down the line, it officially hits the magical, pristine edition. Now you can truly play the game for what it is. And if anyone wants to start, feel free.
Well,
Go ahead, Tomo.
Go ahead. I was just going to make a quick comment. I definitely, over time, have become more and more tolerant of the sort of incomplete game. I think that, I'm browsing experience. I'm consuming experience, and I'll take what's there in many cases. Certainly, I'm not like I don't see a game that's not done yet and go, oh, I got to check it out. It's certainly obviously less interesting if it's not done than if it is done. But I don't think I have any particular negative bias for that any longer, and I think I definitely did. We'll say like 15 years ago.
The event of early access games has kind of conditioned us to be a little bit more accepting of that. Jumping into an early access game, I do have the thought in my head of why play it now, why not wait? But with a single player story driven game, I certainly think that you want to wait. And the long tail situation is not necessarily the best thing in the world for that. I don't see the reason to play Wastelands 2 years before it goes into retail. Just throwing out Wastelands as a name, not anything about Wasteland specifically. But for something that is meant to evolve over time, or content can be added in large chunks like the main story and then the after stories and DLC down the line, then it's a lot fairer to go into it now. In the example of Star Renegades at launch, it was a perfectly reasonable game. It was a good length. So anything they put into it at this point is just gravy. I think I mentioned Star Traders yesterday. They've done 250 updates, and they've all been pretty substantial content updates. So the experience of playing it, 3 years ago when it came out, is totally different than now. But doesn't that create the incentive to keep people playing? Mm-hmm. Hey, let me see what's new.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Seth said, because it depends on the game. Like, if it's a story-based game kind of thing, I'm going to expect the complete experience when I play it. I don't, want, any kind of real big issues. Now, if it's additional content on top of that, additional story after the fact, that I'm fine with. But, the core experience that I experienced in the story, I don't want to have to go back and play through that all over again. I mean, I may want to, but I don't want to have to be able to experience this content. So it needs to be something extra on the side, whereas like an early access game, a roguelike, game as a service kind of thing, that kind of thing, I'm absolutely down for it. But when it comes to like certain genres, I'm not.
Anything from you, Ramin?
Yeah, this is a difficult question for me to answer, just because I'm so jaded as a gamer at this point that, especially single-player games, if I like the game, if it's interesting, I'll play it for maybe 10 hours, and by then I can pretty much predict how it's going to end up, or I'm seeing enough, for me, design flaws that I'm starting to get annoyed, or any number of reasons. If I'll quit, usually I don't play a game more than 10 hours. If it's a really fantastic fit and it's a single player game, yeah, I might play it longer, like if it's a Civilization game or something like that. But the majority of games I play that I played for a long time are games that are team-based, multiplayer, where with persistent teams, where your team, you have the same team every time you log in every day. So I'm getting to I'm getting that social interaction with other people, which is much more attractive to me than just the math that I'm pumping when I'm playing a computer game. And those types of games seem like they're becoming more and more rare over time, even though I think there's a lot of demand for that, especially as people are socially isolated and are looking for ways to socially interact. But those games tend to be more complex and more expensive to build, so even if you did somehow get funded for it, it takes a long time to bring it to market.
And to the chat, they've been talking about games like WoW. And when we see titles that develop over a very long period of time, and just it seems like these games tend to do one of two things. They either go for, adding more to what's there. More story-driven content. If we had 6 dungeons and 5 raids, let's add 5 more of those. If we go with something like a lot of the expansions to the Binding of Isaac, the majority of them is adding in more stuff. More possible room layouts, more enemies, more items. You're not changing what's there. But then we have this other category, and this is where we kind of get into like the real long tail design, when it's not just about adding more to what's there, but how do we grow this game? And we can look at examples like Warframe. Again, Warframe has received so many updates over the last decade that it is very much an entirely different game now than it was at start. Team Fortress, with the inclusion of the Manco store, new items, events. What was another one? Like Sea of Thieves. And again, we can even point to something like No Man's Sky. That No Man's Sky is definitely not the same game it was at day one of launch. And
was it a game at launch?
It's now certainly a game. It's gotten a lot more accolades. But the point about this is that these are games that if you were to play them, week 1, month 1, year 1, you could very well have 3 distinct different experiences. So and again, especially for like Tomo, Ramin, and Shark here, who are designing games around kind of this long tail discussion, like, what are your thoughts on like games that have to, or games that fundamentally change, as their lifespan grows?
Well, I mean, I think that the longer your game exists, the more it has to change, right? If you give enough time, then, I mean, people people need to keep exploring, and no matter how much content you make, at some point it will all be used up, right? And so service can continue to provide content. I'm sure there are a lot of really clever tricks we can do to kind of change things up in the way people interact, but it's just so efficient. I mean, I think there was a time when World of Warcraft would make pretty significant changes upon expansion releases, and I know they kind of shied away from that in this last round. And I think they'd considered it a problem, and a lot of players would complain about it. But it was like the only thing that kept it alive so long, right? You need to that whole fresh new need to re-explore, need to kind of understand rules again, and you don't have to change everything. But if you're going to have a game and you intend to hold users for years and years and years, then the experience needs to evolve along with them. What is the right change for a game that all of its users are bored to death of because they've pumped 800 hours into it? And no matter what you are, that whatever that next step is, it's different than what you presently are.
Yeah, with my game, I don't see it so much as like the goal is to change as we progress, but rather to evolve. Where like the core experience is still the same. It's still a grid-based CCG kind of thing, and the rules don't change. What changes is the the cards that are in there, the powers that are in there, so that when you get like different powers, the gameplay experience itself is different, but the actual core is still the same. So you're not physically doing something different, you're just interacting with that same thing in a completely different way.
So I would say that as a neuroscientist, I look at there's 2 loops that are going to drive long-term engagement. You have dopamine loops, which is what 99% of games as a service providers are trying to hit, and you have oxytocin loops, which are still pretty much invisible or mysterious to developers. And the thing is, with dopamine loops, they decrease in efficacy over time. Oxytocin loops increase in efficacy over time. So if you want your game to last long enough, you've got to either use a lot of tricks to try to reset the body's dopamine clock so that it still works again. You can do that by creating lots of make it unpredictable by having people battling different other users every time, like maybe in World of Tanks or World of Warships, so you can never really predict how it's going to turn out. But with oxytocin loops, you need to have some consistent social interaction day after day, and if as you're building friendships, that's increasing. Blizzard doesn't understand this, so they added things like dungeon finders to make the game more accessible and to make the game more casual. But the problem is that made the social bond. It broke the social bonds. You didn't need to create social bonds anymore. You just hit a button and you're in a group. You didn't have to go through the work of creating social attachment in order to go into the end game content. And so they actually were shooting their game right in the one thing that was keeping people engaged. That's unfortunate, because if they understood that, they wouldn't have the decline in users that they've been experiencing the last few years.
All right.
Back in the old MMO days, going back 20 years, I wanted to call out specifically Asheron's Call. One of the things that was done in Asheron's Call is we destroyed one of the cities, or they destroyed one of the cities. There was an ongoing storyline with the game that was kind of projected into the updates. And this was new back then. I mean, World of Warcraft wasn't out yet. Ultima Online was the big competitor. And Asheron's Call was the smallest of the three games, EverQuest, UO, and Asheron's Call. So the long tail of that was people got vested into the storyline of each update. And that became very powerful for World of Warcraft later on with Blizzard. And that long tail experience is really the pinnacle of long tail gaming, or at least in my opinion.
And I think has kind of I'm not sure if this would be a true one-to-one modern day equivalent of it, but it is a case of a developer really pushing for that. Would probably be Fortnite right now. Fortnite has, it is a game that, Jack and I still need to do our We Hate Fortnite cast at some point together whenever he's done teaching. But it is very much a case of this game built around this kind of lore surrounding what's going on with it, the multiple collabs. It is a game that it's trying to keep people invested through this kind of story structure. And I mean, we could even go back to during the heyday of Team Fortress, when they started to really get involved with the lore with those comic books. And for fans of Team Fortress, you probably remember that the very first comic books they did were just here's our wacky character, these are the wacky weapons you're gonna get. And then they involved this entire mythos surrounding the company. Oh, I think we lost Tomo there? Or?
Yeah,
Yep.
Tomo.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Oh, wait, he's coming back. Oh, wait. There we go. Yeah, they had a lot of comics. Oh, there he is.
Was it just me that got lost there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think something happened on mine. But
That's all right. But again, this idea that that you could tie the story into these updates. I think Tomo's frozen now. But it looked like he was posing with his drink, so a nice little drink advertisement. There we go. But the point for this is that, and I think to what Seth was saying, and as well as to Ramin, that you can, if you engage people in this way, you give them something that really matters. That's not just, oh, I log on every day for, +5 bonus currency from my weekly engagement. But if we can tell this ongoing story, Fail Better with Fallen London being another really big example of this, that it gives more weight to these games, and it is far more attractive than just saying, again, log on, get 10 bonus bucks, and that's it.
But I find it's kind of interesting how, at its essence, it's just ever more complex and somewhat more meaningful versions of that.
Mm-hmm.
What about when we look at long tail gaming from, like, say, the rogue deck builder style game? Slay the Spire obviously has long-term development long tail development built into it. People play that for 1,000, 2,000 hours, and I don't think they've ever done a DLC. I know they've done modding, but I don't think they've done a paid DLC.
I know they've added in. I know they've added in at least one new character since 1.0, but I think that was just integrated into the game. Like, it was not considered a DLC.
Yeah, it was just a freebie.
I think is what they were expecting to do.
So they were expected to make something.
No, they were that they released the game and it was playable, and Mr. Number 3 was on its way, and then when Mr. Number 3 was ready, they just plopped it in.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't handled like a service necessarily. It was more handled like developing while people were watching.
Okay. So this game has, a 96% Steam rating, a tremendous amount of positive ratings, overly positive or overwhelmingly positive. So where's the incentive to design something like that? Is it all on the front end? Is this considered long tail?
I would say no, but I would call this more like so Spire is more like a labor of love. And, I mean, they don't get rewarded by the people who have already paid and played the game by adding more content to a game that's already an amazing game. But what they do get is to get the amazing ratings on Steam, and they get buzz that makes it a must-play game for everybody, so that more people will continue to buy the product. And they don't have to discount it either.
And I would honestly say, and first, before I forget, to Chris's comment, they did add in, when the game hit 1.0, they had 3 characters. Silent, Ironclad, and Watcher. They added in a 4th character. I don't remember its name. I'm terrible with it. It's the only thing I remember for it. And it did start as early access when it was first on Steam. And yeah, I think I would agree that it's not really long tail, at least not in what we've described it as. I would say maybe something closer would be something like Monster Train. That when Monster Train was released, it did have actual DLC put into it. They only, several was considered free, but one of it was paid, and that was a $12 expansion. Now, unfortunately, Monster Train has nowhere near the same amount of reviews and buzz as Slay the Spire, even though it is another amazing game.
It is great. I actually prefer it to Slay. But I think, though, I want to disagree with the fact that this isn't, that the long-term roguelike is still you don't necessarily have to have a live operations team or an ongoing story to develop for the long tail. I mean, at this point, everybody and their brother owns Slay the Spire. It goes on sale so much that I don't even bother, telling people about it going on sale because everybody owns it. But the brilliance of the design was that people can play this for 1,000 hours. Same thing with Isaac. There's certainly lessons to be learned in long tail game design from Isaac.
Yep.
I just to kind of separate 2 points, right? I think that there are some fundamentally different things between kind of long-term player user base maintenance and designing for long hours played. Now, obviously, if you want to maintain the experience for users or maintain the engagement of a user base, you're going to have to make use of design techniques or perspectives, or be able to understand what it means to hold a user for hundreds and hundreds of hours. But you don't need to make a game that's designed for users to spend hundreds of hours in that doesn't demand that you then serve the game over the long haul or kind of enter into the games as service model. But I do think the degree to which I would be interested in serving users over a long haul would be in the fashion of how I would intend to hold users for hundreds of hours in any given game experience. And you mentioned Warframe before. I think I have like 2,500 hours in Warframe, and I love it. I love the space that's available to explore in their progression. They definitely turn grinding into a good word, in my opinion. And what am I grinding for? It's like I'm willing to work so that I can explore the gameplay space that they've built, and the gameplay space is the thing that kind of keeps me and holds me. It's like, yeah, I love it. I'd love to see if by increasing the rate of fire by 4% and increasing my magazine size by 25% and then adding 22% of electricity damage, what that's going to feel like in the game. And that's a super straightforward thing to change in the experience. It's and that's really truly like one of 1,000 vectors you could explore. Probably 1,000's underselling it. And like in the context of Epic Tavern, we're trying to create as many pathways for a player to explore, and this feeling like you have to leave untread territory behind. So at some point, you can loop back around and try again.
I think if you're going to use a retail business model, which I don't recommend, but if you are going to do it, you get a chance. It's a binary. You either make a sale or you don't. And so if you're charging $20 for your game and you want to make sure people buy it, you provide $40 worth of value, and then at $20, a lot of people will buy it. If you raise the value to $80, then even more people will buy it. But it requires more and more work to create more and more value just to get a few extra percent of the top that haven't bought your game yet. And that doesn't make sense from a business standpoint, unless you're trying to become like the new Blizzard to replace the old Blizzard that's falling off. Early on, Blizzard made these games that had 10 or 20 times the value of what they were selling the game for, and they kept doing this. And because they kept doing it, they created a reputation where everybody wanted the next game, and then there would be lines outside the store for the games when it would release. This changed with Diablo 3 and after that, where they started instead of focusing on content, they started focusing on mathematical and psychological methods to extract more money from the same content instead of just overbuilding the content. And so the value of Blizzard games has just dropped year after year to the point where now people are not nearly as enthusiastic about the brand. So for somebody like the developers of Slay the Spire, to me, it only makes sense to create $200 worth of value for a $20 game if they are trying to raise money for another game where they're going to provide even more content and charge significantly more, either as games as a service or as a one-time sale or or something that has DLCs, because now they've built that reputation, and that reputation can be converted into a business proposition.
One could say that building a reputation at all would increase your marketing power for every game after that, making marketing cheaper and more widely available, so that even if you don't carry through with stuff going forward kind of thing, you have the reputation to just boost every game after it.
Well, I mean, I feel like a lot of developers don't know how much what they're putting together is worth, so they just try as damn hard as they can and see how it plays out. And those guys just turn out to make something quite awesome. I totally agree with what Ramin is saying. Like in the context of Epic Tavern, I feel like at least we're trying to pursue sort of a similar shape. And for us, the only thing that makes it worth it is this idea that we're building kind of a machine that we could reuse. And that's part of the sort of longer term business proposition around that title. And even still, we wouldn't dare abandon our work for hire practices because, we don't want to disappear overnight.
So, also as a quick time check, we're about 40 minutes in, so I just want to make sure everyone is still good time wise, things like that.
Yep.
Okay.
Dynamite.
All right. So there are two topics or two questions I want to bring up for the table, and then if the chat has any questions or if you guys have any topics you want to bring up, definitely feel free. So one thing that we haven't touched on yet is the mobile side or the free-to-play side of things. We've been kind of dancing around and we spent a lot of time talking about things from a single-player point of view, but mobile and free-to-play games have definitely, or at least the ones that have survived, have embraced long-tail design. That again, if you want people to keep playing and obviously keep paying, you need to be building your game around that. And over the last 2 years, I've been playing a lot of kind of the more, I guess, quote unquote, newer mobile games. I've tried Genshin, Arc Knights, Punishing Gray Raven, Princess Connect, a lot of these different titles. And the thing about them is that they're often designed around not just, what are we doing next month, but what are we doing in year 2, in year 3. MiHoYo, the ones who did Henshin Impact or whatever it's called in Genshin Impact, they have a lot of things planned for it. And the question I want to bring up to the table and to the chat is, when you're thinking about your how do you think or how do you approach thinking about your game, not just in terms of I'm going to put so and so in my game in 3 weeks, but I'm going to be building this in the next 6 months. I'm going to have this out in a year and a half. And then in 2 years' time, maybe we'll have this unique system in our game.
I know for me, we're planning on hopefully going with a major update every 3 months, where we have a new set of cards with new mechanics in them, kind of thing. And I am trying not to put the cart before the horse and trying to focus as much as I can on everything in the first set, because there's no guarantee that there's going to be a second set. However, on the backside of that, I am planning, baselines, outlines on what I want to do in the future, kind of thing, in a more, I guess you'd say it like a sketch or a prototype kind of form, where, this is kind of an outline of what I want to do. This is this amorphous blob that has some kind of shape to it, but it's not fully formed, kind of thing. And this is kind of the direction I want to go, but this is not exact, and this can change based off of whatever happens from the first set.
With the mobiles, one of the things that causes them to have such a long-term outlook is these crossovers that they're bringing in. I mean, how long did it take for Arc Knights to sign the deal with Ubisoft? How long did it to bring in Rainbow Six? How long did it take to build the assets for that? That had to be planned out probably a year and ahead. You can't just ink a major contract like that, come up with all the assets for it. Well, okay, maybe the assets aren't that hard if you've got tons of animators and artists, but on the contract side, those things take time. The other thing is the nature of the game. They're not going to survive as a game or a service if they don't have these long-term plans. The game loops themselves are fairly simple, and people will burn out from those, despite the dopamine release systems. And the oxytocin system's interesting. I need to learn more about how to trigger that in a game. But back to the point is they have to enhance these games, or the churn rate will be so enormous with people leaving. And a lot of people, burn out from your gachas or your mobile games and just come back when a new banner is released or when the new update comes out. They play the update, they play out the content, and they leave again. And even if they're spending a lot of money, they're doing it in these spurts. And one of these days, I'll have to figure out if it's better to have 100 whales spending in spurts or 10 whales spending constantly. I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
My best guess for kind of like such patterns is really that making big mobile games is so costly that they need to make big gambles and long-term plans to get there, and that it's unlike sort of the indie scene on PC, that there is no viable middle ground, right? You basically, the vast majority of the stuff that becomes big, and I'm not saying there aren't exceptions because there always will be, but that what you're seeing is the byproduct of a great deal of money and a great deal of careful planning. And even then, it doesn't often turn out all that awesome.
Yeah, and I think the problem with a lot of the mobile games I've been playing is that I think there is such a thing as thinking too far ahead in terms of your content. That, as I said on our little Discord chat with Punishing Grey Raven, that they have 2.5 to 3 years of content scoped out for this game, but they are drip feeding it about a month to 2 months at a time. And as somebody who's playing this on their global server, I am about completely bored with this game. They just announced an update, or they had their new monthly event going on right this second. I have just not felt the motivation to play it, because the first month I was all in, doing the whole gacha, the whole gameplay loop itself, but I'm not seeing anything new that's keeping me invested. And I think as to what Seth was saying, that I'm sure there's people who, they will log on maybe once a month, they'll spend maybe $50 to $100 or whatever to acquire the newest banner, and then they'll disappear for another 30 to 45 days. But for me, it's the same pattern, that once I lose that reason to play these games daily, it becomes harder and harder for me to just want to log back in again, no matter what they do. And I watched a video that they went through the next 3 years of content. It sounds like there's some amazing things, a lot of things that will fix the game. But how many people are going to wait around, I think, for the promise that, 8 months from now, your problems with this game will be gone?
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's so easy in the context of mobile games. The bigger they are, the more likely in so many ways that you as an individual are being left behind. But that's not the case for whatever sufficiently large number of payers, sufficiently large number of big spenders that are in the system. And what happens is, once that starts to happen, it starts to gain kind of a life of its own. And if you're not kind of in that sort of cadre of player types, the game will evolve away from your interests. And, it's not like we can ask ourselves questions like, why would anyone want to do X, Y, or Z? But the very fact that they're choosing to do it, unless they don't know what they're doing, but I mean, a lot of big mobile development, it is very much the opposite of not knowing what they're doing. They're making horrific amounts of money.
Yep.
They're following processes that have been established kind of in stone over the course of a reasonably long period of time. And it just turns out that there are these chunks of people that are very different from you or I, that have discovered something that they enjoy quite a bit. They happen to also be in a demographic where they have disposable income to spend on this experience, and they are by voting with their money, are pushing legislation of sorts to create a society that you're not going to feel interested in sticking around in.
Well, every time they release some sort of major update, the metrics that are being tracked by these large mobile games and games as a service, by say like Lilith or something, when billions of dollars are on the line, any change to the game needs to be monitored and tracked, and that may be one of the reasons why they're drip feeding some of this content, so that even though they have a feeling it'll improve the play experience, they need to make sure that they're not going to release something that's going to push people away.
I would say if you're going drip feed like that, it needs to be more frequently.
Sure.
But I mean, Seth's logic is sound. I mean, go ahead, Ramin.
Okay. I like to listen for a while before I jump in, but don't want to get left behind. There's some strategy going on the part of the developer. If you're going to do games as a service, the primary goal is you've got a certain user acquisition cost, the cost to get your player into the game. And in order to be successful, you have to be able to extract a certain amount of money that's greater than the cost to get the user in the game. And if you create a system where you know you're going to make more money on average per person than the cost of user acquisition, then you can just ramp up all the way, hire Arnold Schwarzenegger or Mariah Carey to do Super Bowl commercials, and as long as you're making more money than you paid to get the user in, the more you scale it up, the more money you make. But the data collection that Seth's referring to, you can only get data for what's happening now, not what's going to happen. So it creates a pressure to get quick sales, quick funding extraction that you can measure in your metrics in your game. So you get companies like Machine Zone, which try to go for the very quick kill in the first week or so after a person logs in, to try to make that user acquisition cost back right away, that they can demonstrate mathematically. The other way to do it is much more complex and potentially more risky, like for instance with my World of Warships designs, where you create a system where you feel confident enough that people will play the game for 2-3+ years and keep spending the whole time under the design, so that even though the metrics, it may take a while to make back the user acquisition cost, initially that might be a little bit anxiety producing for the developer, because they don't know when they're going to break even, or even if they're going to break even. But if you do it right then, and the user stays in, and even if they're spending a relatively small amount of money, but they're doing consistently every month for years, you end up making a huge multiple of the user acquisition cost back. And that's why, basically Wargaming has stopped making games after those last 2 games I had to design, because they don't need to, because their games are just still making money 7 years after I designed them.
Yeah, it's thinking long term versus short term, because you see this with a lot of AAA kind of thing, where even on games that are not live services kind of thing, where they think short term kind of thing, and they're just all pushing everything short term, and screw what happens long term in the company. And that's part of the reason why Blizzard is where it is now, because it's always been pushing short term, never thinking about the long term, and now it's
that's a recent development. Recent. That haven't always been like that.
Yeah.
And whatever Blizzard did, if we hold it up as a negative example, we would take one of the most winningest paths of development in the history of mankind and calling it not good.
Well, we're talking about their more recent stuff, where they've just been short-term focused.
You can shit in your bed, and then at the very end, everyone will say everything you did sucked, right?
I would say the merger with Activision definitely changed the culture at Blizzard. Maybe not right away, but it was gradually happened.
Although it is worth noting that a lot of the things they're in trouble for today happened before that merger.
Yep.
Well, I'm not referring to the current events in the news. I'm referring to the monetization models and stuff like that. The way they've really like, they've gone from trying to provide quality and everything to rather draining every cent out of somebody's wallet at the cost of draining that person completely out of their fan base, kind of thing.
I guess so. I don't know. I know lots of people that the amounts that they've bought from WoW made them happier than anything else.
And
I think that the second time I got contacted by Blizzard was somewhere around, I don't know, 2012, 2013, and it was like a new vice president or something that over at Blizzard who had a PhD, and he wanted to build a data team, and he wanted to see if I could help him build this data team. And I tried to steer him in a different direction. I mean, I told him I'm not the person who builds a data team. I'm the person who interprets the data that you get from the data team. But I was trying to warn him that, and I ended up finally coming out and like really explaining all this in my data implosion paper, that the whole point of hiring a data team is trying to figure out ways to raise the price of your product so you can extract more value from the product, the same product. But that doesn't increase the value of your product to the consumer. In fact, it lowers the value of the product to the consumer because you've raised the price without raising the content. And this is the thing. The focus for a while at Blizzard was, let's improve the quality. Let's keep improving the quality. It just kept going up until this happened. This was the shift in culture. This was the moment when this guy came in, and it wasn't just him. I'm sure somebody hired him and had this idea also. That let's switch to using quantitative methods instead of qualitative methods to create more money from our products. And to some extent, this made sense because they had overbuilt their game so much that they weren't really they weren't charging as much money as people were willing to spend. So really what they needed was higher prices along with the higher quality. But they're just thinking in binary. So instead of thinking they need both of these things, they just stopped improving the quality and just focused on improving the cost. And over time, this lowered the value of the products of Blizzard every year until it got to an inflection point where now people are bailing out because they complain, this game is not getting any better. If anything, it's getting worse. But the prices just keep going up and up with all these different ways that they're charging the microtransactions or linking mounts to subscriptions or whatever. And so they lost what they started with. I think there's merits in both of those approaches, and the trick isn't maximizing one or the other. The trick is blending them so that you are charging at the rate of the value that you're providing so that people keep giving you that money.
And to kind of add on to what Seth and Ramin were saying about, analyzing the releases and as well as like what it means to go short term versus long term. I think this again is a major push in terms of mobile design. Again, like game like Arknights, I think they're like 2 years old. I know they're over a year old now. Genshin Impact is definitely over a year, and for a lot of mobile games, like the year or the annual kind of reward or annual festival is kind of like, the Medal of Honor for these games. That if they can survive a year, it usually means something has gone incredibly right for them. And I think one of the biggest shifts in terms of like mobile and even just games as a service is what Ramin was describing, that like the machine zone, very much fun pain, very short-term, short-term profit model that kind of dominated mobile for since like the early 2010s and maybe 2016, 2017 is not really viable anymore. Consumers don't want to play a game that's kind of like punching them in the face and saying, give me your money. They want to go for this game that they feel comfortable and confident that they're going to enjoy this game and they're going to give it money more over time. And when they see that there's that value there, they're more in line to spend. Maybe they're not going to spend $200 in a single month, but maybe they'll spend $10 to $15 a month. And it's one of the reasons why one thing that drives me to a lot of these mobile games, or the ones that are like more like action or modern day, is that they typically have fixed purchases. That's not just buy $100 of premium gems. It's spend $10 and we'll give you a bonus reward every month, or this is just a one-time purchase. And I think that kind of stuff is something you need to consider when it comes to long tail design, because I think this is another point we haven't really touched on yet, but it has to be said: earning money. Again, for Ramin and Shark, you're developing multiplayer and social driven games. Like, you need to be considering how are we going to be earning money over these kinds of experiences? Because as we all know, if your game's not bringing in money, it's not going to survive a year, 2 years, 3 years, and so on.
Yeah, and when you have to release more content, because like eventually everything that you release for sale, unless you just have a massive budget, kind of thing, eventually everything that you release, for sale is everybody's going to own everything, and there's not going to be anything left for them to buy. So you have to keep on adding more stuff for them to buy, but you can't just do that. I mean, you have to, give the people who are free players something to continue to go forward, because we've seen this so many times with games where they give the free players basically nothing, and then they give they make everything paid, and then when you do that kind of thing, you end up seeing the paying players cannibalize all the free players. They all quit, and then they start cannibalizing their own ranks until the bottom levels quit, and then keeps on until there's only one player left, and then they quit, and your game is dead.
In the go ahead.
Go ahead, Seth. Go ahead, Seth. I had a long talk before.
In the CCG and what would Ramin you'd classify your upcoming CCG? No, it's not really CCG. It's collectible.
It's a massive multiplayer, super social, play to earn, free to play. I'm throwing the
more acronyms than you can throw a stick at.
There we go.
Recursive progression.
I mean, I'm literally combining an MMO with a social network to create something that just goes beyond what we've been able to do with MMOs before. This is the goal.
So in the long tail design for that, I would assume you're doing things up front to basically be able to add on things at a later date. In the CC, I haven't worked in the CCG world. So Sharky, you may be able to tell me I'm wrong on this, but I don't think they're planning out 6 months or 6 years of Magic the Gathering expansions and keywords that are going to be added in. I think they're being designed as they go along.
Honestly, don't know, but
what
I know
what
that
are you doing? Is the base game going to be extensible?
Well, my plan is that, I'm just aiming right now for a complete base game, the first set and everything that is right with it. And then I have like some guidelines and goals which are directing me to the second set, but none of that is in stone.
Okay.
So it's loosely planned just for, a few, and as you go up farther and farther sets, the looser the plans get, kind of thing.
Okay. I wanted to touch on what, long tail looks like on a collectible or a CCG. It's really what I was driving at.
For me, the CC, it's not a collectible cards, it's collectible creatures, but that's just the excuse to get people together so that they'll have fun playing with other players. But I don't want to make it sound like I'm trivializing it by saying it's just an excuse, because most games start with the gameplay, and then at the end they'll after they finish the gameplay development, they'll create the metagame that creates the spending and all that stuff, almost like as an afterthought. Since metagame is my specialty, with our game, I've already designed 3.5 years of metagame progression before we've even really started the gameplay development, and I've designed it so instead of, like in most games where most of the value is up front and then the value to the player goes down every month as they get bored, I start them with a limited amount of content, and then over time it explodes to just a massive amount of content. So I'm reversing the trends that the value goes up over time for the participants, both in terms of the dopamine and the oxytocin loops, and I actually charge more as time goes on, because I know people will be more invested and they'll have expanded their budget for entertainment on my product over time. So the game starts off basically free and very inexpensive, but I anticipate people will spend and be earning thousands of dollars as they get past the 1 year mark.
Well, there's something sort of essential to what you've described, both in this call and maybe a little bit before. This idea that as I invest more of my time, I'm starting to create sort of this. I am sinking cost, right? And then I'm actually creating as a player, and as I'm basically building my value in that experience, and therefore it should become more valuable to me, right? That I think we have such a coarse relationship with product and cost, and that we're only starting to scratch the surface of really how sophisticated it gets and how much it's really connected to this imagination the imagination that we all have. And it's gonna be really interesting to watch your stuff in action and see where the large thrust of it, where it heads.
I think I talk about this in my group monetization paper, where people are not like static numbers that a data scientist can just say, oh, this person is worth 5.3 units of whatever. They evolve, and we talked about this before, where like these quick gotcha sales techniques are becoming less and less effective over time because consumers are adapting. They're organic. They learn. They grow. And then when you get them together in large groups, what I call persistent game collectives, they act as a hive mind and they share knowledge. And this means they adapt much faster and much more effectively. So even though you may think you're smarter than the player, as the hive mind is smarter than you because it's a collective of thousands of minds. Mm-hmm. And so your ability to trick players is getting lower and lower over time, and they're adapting. So, but because they are adapting, you can take advantage of this by having them adapt to a high value product by increasing their budget to that product. Now, you can't do that with a retail game like the early Blizzard games that were probably worth thousands of dollars to people, but they did. They raised their budgets to thousands of dollars, but that didn't go to Blizzard. It went to third parties like IGE that were extracting all that additional propensity to spend that Blizzard didn't know how to tap. Blizzard said, "Oh well, we got to raise our prices," but they weren't honest about it, and they forgot to raise the value as they were doing that at the same time. So if you want to raise your prices over time, you have to increase the value of the game over time, and this is the hardest thing to do as a developer because people get bored. They want something fresh. They want something new, and so it's very difficult to make a game increase in value over time instead of decrease in value over time. And of course, that's a focus of much of my last 10, 15 years of research.
But like what you're doing, though, to make it happen seems like the viable course, right? Is that it will increase in value because I'm putting myself into that experience, right? I'm kind of investing. I'm like, theoretically, all the users are adding their value into it, which is then going to boost it for everybody. It's super cool theory stuff. By the way, I just want to say one.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Totally. Well, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is what life is.
People go into marriages, they think, oh, this is super high value. And they think, oh, I'll be in this relationship for the rest of my life because I can't imagine, this is such a great, relationship. But the thing is, people get lazy in relationships and they say, oh, I've already got you. And they put in that less and less effort over time. And at some point, the cost gets higher than the value, and then they're out of there. And you're
totally.
And now we have the marriage advice section of our roundtable.
Oh, well,
I have one small little story about Blizzard, which I thought was very interesting to me at the time, which is, I feel like them trying to go in the complete wrong direction, even though I loved what they did for me personally. At some point, they had these WoW tokens that you could farm up. That I could spend X amount, like I think it was like $15 for $10 worth, like for a $10 month, or $20 for $15 worth of WoW time, and then I could sell it on the auction house, and it would be like somewhere between like 300,000 and 100,000 gold, and it fluctuated. Maybe it's down below 50 now. But the key being, at some point, they allowed you to buy the with WoW Gold, the game token, and then they let you then redeem it for its actual game time value in the Blizzard store. And at the time, I had millions of WoW gold. And so I burned through all my WoW gold. I bought a bunch of tokens, turned it into Blizzard store balance, and bought literally everything on the store in like 20 minutes. And after doing it, I felt like they totally did the wrong thing. I'm like, this isn't what you give to me for putting all this time into WoW. Because it was too easy and it was too much, and now there's nothing else I can buy from your store.
You got it. It kept you very engaged for like an hour.
Yeah, it was a great 20 minutes, by the way, because I thought I was getting away with murder. And I appreciate them for allowing me to do that, but I think that from the higher level, it was a poor strategy move.
Yeah, that's like the affair. And then you feel dirty afterwards.
Strangely enough, and this is sort of tragic, it also allowed me to buy Destiny. And I have to be fair, over the course of 17 years, I have stopped playing WoW, but I do still play Destiny.
Keeping you in the ecosystem.
Well, Destiny's not part of Activision Blizzard anymore, unfortunately. So it's like a Shakespeare family relationship.
As another time check, we are an hour and 10 in. I figure, are you guys good for another 15, 20 minutes? Do anyone have to get going like a little, right around there?
I'm totally good for 15 or 20 minutes.
Okay. All right. So we'll wrap things up.
Ramin's stuttering.
Yeah. I'm just looking. I've got an hour before my next meeting. So.
Okay. I only we're going to be an hour, and we're going to be tired by then. But is everybody good for another? Yeah, I know.
Josh, we've done going over.
Yeah, we gotta be careful here. Okay. Well, we'll set it then for, I would say, another 15 to 20 minutes, if that works for everyone, and then we'll go into our wrap-up. So, for the chat watching, this will be officially last call for questions. So, a question came in from Chris earlier before the marriage counseling section we just had. But it is, I think, a very interesting one, and it's something, again, that for developers here, that I wanted to get everybody's opinion. And that is, on the topic of games that cut the cord too early. That, as we've said, the market has changed dramatically over the past 10 years. And just as it does with every decade of the game industry. And one of the things that we're seeing, even in single-player games, are consumers saying, what else you got? Your game's at 1.0, what else? And the idea of, should developers these days, even if you're making a single-player game, even if it is an 8 to 10 hour story-driven game, do you think that they should be keeping in the back of their minds, what should I do next? And like an example that I saw would be Battle Brothers. That Battle Brothers came out, developers were like, we're kind of done. Like, we don't really want to do anything else. And the consumers like, no, we want more of this game. And I think they eventually got like 3 expansions out of those developers when they originally said we didn't want to do it. And again, I think there is a point that it is fair to say that 1.0 means 1.0. That, this is our game. It's done. But is that leaving a lot of meat on the table that could extend the life of this game? Again, and I'll show it after this. Like, again, with Slay the Spire and Dead Cells, both games are still being talked about. They're still being played due to how much work was done after those games were done.
Go ahead, Seth.
Back when I started playing computer games, that was it.
Yep.
You got 1.0. That was it. You were done. Playing Gary Grigsby's Guadalcanal, which is probably one of my first strategy games. I certainly wanted more of it. Never got it. Never would get it. I got, a different game, North Atlantic 86, which covered a different time period, but was similar. 1.0 was it. We've gotten spoiled that we can have a game as a service or a game that has 1,000 hours of playtime into it or something where the developers will keep on putting into it, like in the Battle Brothers scenario. So there's major bonuses to this, but yeah, if they just leave it at 1.0, they're leaving a lot on the table.
I'm going to use Civilization 6 as my example here. I'm a big Civ fan, and I worked on Civ World and Civ Online. With Civ 6, they did such a great job with it, and that it sold so well. They never had to discount the game, at least for years, because they over delivered. They gave you way more than whatever $60 worth of value in Civilization 6. But because of that, they're like, oh well, let's tap that enthusiasm and make a bunch of add-ons and generate more money. The problem is that's a great idea. But the problem is when you make a game that's so good, it's very difficult to make it better with an addition. And so what happened is they'd release these DLCs. You already know where I'm going with this, Tomo, right? So that the reviews were like, oh, these add-ons actually make the game worse. And so the community was actually telling people don't buy the DLCs because the original game is better and you'll screw up your original game with the DLC. And so like I'm a huge Civ fan, but I actually haven't played the expansions to Civ 6 because I don't want to wreck Civ 6. So this is what's, and this would be an obstacle for maybe like Slay the Spire. I mean, they could always create new avatars, and that doesn't ruin that partitions from the other previous avatars. It doesn't necessarily ruin the game experience. Let's say like make it too easy. I had this problem with Endless Space 2 where they put in the ability to take to gain control of this mega fleet that just steamrolls the entire map and ruins the game for me because either the game suddenly becomes too easy if I get the control of the master fleet, or I get steamrolled if the AI gets a hold of that fleet, and and even though I'm way ahead of everybody and work so hard, I just get crushed for just what feels like arbitrary reasons. So I would love to just uninstall that DLC if I could and go back before they ruin their own game.
And like the opposite of like this discussion, and I want to throw to what Seth was going to say too, would be Parallax Interactive. Like they're the complete opposite of this question. They just say our game comes out, and then we're releasing 2 to 3 years more of DLC and expansions to it. Stellaris, Stellaris, Crusader Kings, Robo Universalis. Like there's the amount of DLC in those games is so confusing. You need a chart to figure out, what's in what DLC and which ones to buy.
Well, that's because they want you to buy them all.
Yeah.
Just buy them all, and then you don't need to worry about the order.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting side to the long tail with Paradox producing a subscription model for their DLC now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you can get, you get the Europa Universalis subscription for $12 a month or whatever it is, and you get all the DLC until you stop paying.
I think subscriptions are going to make a comeback. I'm betting on it myself.
No, I think so. It's time. It's like somehow we've the giant wheel has turned back around.
That's like the strangest thing, because like with the mobile games that a fixed price per month that gets you X amount rewards, X amount guarantees, that's a subscription. Like if I'm paying $15 a month to get bonus resources or free gacha rolls, man, I'm subscribed to this game.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Premium account for sure. That's the classic first veil that they put over the subscription.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, all the wargaming titles use that, and it's worked very well for us in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have about 25% coverage over the last 5 years with World of Tanks Premium subscription, and that I could turn it on and off at will.
Yeah,
wonderfully flexible. It would actually, if anything, it made it so I played over a much longer absolute time frame because I could stop when I needed to and then jump back in, and then when I did do it, I felt like I needed to cluster.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm actually in planning the subscription length to be 1 week in my upcoming title because instead of just one subscription, there's 20 different subscriptions to choose from in my game, and I expect people to jump from one subscription to another because it's a strategic element, which is subscription they choose.
The board game Summoner Wars, which also has a computer one, not the Gacha Summoner Wars, the board game by Plaid Hat, I believe. They are doing a subscription model for their mobile game and I believe their physical game. I need to look more into the physical game to talk the aspects of it. But essentially, you get all the different races if you pay X number of dollars a month. And I don't want to do that. I absolutely refuse to play this game, and I really enjoy Summoner Wars as a game because that's going to cost me a lot more in the long run because, I'm going to have it active when I'm not playing the game, and I'm going to forget to, turn it off. And, when I stop paying for it, I lose access to all the races that I would have had if I spent $3 on each race pack or something like that. So Tomo says it's coming back, and I see it coming back. I don't want it to come back.
Well, I think what also needs to happen, though, to kind of establish it in kind of a better space is that the real fanatics of the game, they know they're getting the subscription because that's just going to happen. But that they might be losing some of the kind of area under the curve that lies just short of subscription, but above zero pay. If they don't have an a la carte menu. But the a la carte menu inevitably has to be just a tiny bit more expensive. And that way the subscription people who are hardcore feel like they're being rewarded by their favorite developer.
Well, that's kind of the approach I took. We have optional subscriptions where you can just buy stuff normally through microtransactions, but you can also sign up for the subscriptions, and that's for two reasons. One, it's so that we can. I would rather have a steady low income rather than whales that are just spending a lot of money all at once, kind of thing. Because I'm not trying to whale or anything. What I'm but like the other aspect is when it provides a better deal, but it's I forgot what I was even going to say now.
I could tell. I mean, all this shit is quite complicated, by the way.
Yeah.
Don't blame you.
VIP in games, especially Eastern games, is traditionally there to reward the whales for just spending a butt ton of money. But I can say that on YouTube, can I?
Yeah.
I'm not going to demonetize you for saying that.
But you never know.
But there's no pay to win at all in my game, and I don't want that. But I also want to encourage people to stay subscribed, even if they may not necessarily need to be subscribed. So I create a residual layer above the subscription level that's like a VIP level that improves over time the longer you're subscribed. And then when you turn off your subscription, that sticks around. It's persistent. So and the only way to get the bonuses that you would get within that VIP level is to stay subscribed over a long period of time. So you can like leave the game and keep your subscription and not stress about it because you're still gaining value, even not even being in the game with the subscription. And thank you, Tomo. Thank you.
That reminded me. The other thing I was going to say was that basically this also, I feel would help, like curb addictions kind of thing, because like some people, with, card packs and, gacha and loot boxes and, all those things are separate, but they're all very similar to each other. But like, I feel like they're all three of them are subject to, addiction kind of thing. And with a subscription model, somebody can be like, I want to support the game through the subscription model kind of thing and just get stuff kind of thing, regularly, rather than, feeling this addiction, kind of thing where I'm just going in and spinning. So it's like a second version of a set spinning limit kind of thing.
The dark side is always a temptation.
Yep.
It's always there. Sharky.
Mhm.
It's always there to tempt you. But I think we're essentially all lightsiders here, which seem like makes us kind of the minority in the industry. But we're trying to make money by creating value for our consumers, not by tricking our consumers into overvaluing the content we're giving them.
Right.
Mhm. All right. So again, I think we are knocking on time for this discussion. So I'm going to give everybody one last go round. Anything you want to add or anything you want to mention regarding long tail design? And this time we'll start. I will start with Tomo and work our way around that side. So, Tomo, feel free.
So a topic that I wasn't necessarily expecting to come up today, but I think is very interesting and very strongly related is some of the nuts and bolts that revolve around kind of how we create like systems and spaces and ideas for players to explore over a long period of time. I think we see a lot of analogies and some really, really long haul episodic entertainment in the world around us. I think we're seeing it get explored with the MCU. Just this like idea of a system that you can't quite understand yet, and then you run through a loop, and that it is of sufficient complexity that it's going to take many, many loops to learn all the ropes. But the process of doing many, many loops allows you to open many, many doors, and that you've created this very interesting sort of like deep shape that players are going to explore. And I think creating those shapes is super, super exciting and fun, and it's obviously the thing that I commit my life to, and maybe sometime down the line we can have a conversation about more of that nitty-gritty words, because in a lot of ways this is large-scale human behavior and economics and stuff that's ultimately probably more important and more relevant, but for a future topic, the how to create interesting complexity for users to consume.
All right. Over to Seth.
I think one of the interesting things that came up from what everybody was talking about and some of the stuff that I brought up was, taking these long-term or long-tail game design concepts that we're seeing in MMOs, that we're seeing in CCGs, that we're seeing in some of the blockchain stuff, and applying those to more traditional experiences, more of the single-player experience. I mean, looking at Tomo's game, Epic Tavern, how much long tail design can go into that? And I joked around in the chat by saying, they were going to start releasing DLC microtransaction packs for storylines. But, that's not actually a bad idea.
Oh, I agree.
I'm going to get a little philosophical here. I see that entertainment as a human need. The higher your stress level, the more you need entertainment. And the entertainment there is to help you cope with stress. And life's getting more and more stressful all the time. And the planet seems to be waging war with us, which isn't helping. So right now, the default entertainment for most of the planet is Facebook. And they'll get in, they just stim with it throughout the day. It's just something that they don't even think about. It's just part of their life. And but now we know, and we actually have evidence that Facebook and, for instance, Instagram actually causes suicides. It actually increases stress instead of decreasing stress. And this is a problem, because if this is your stress outlet and it's causing more stress, you're screwed. So really, my goal here with our company is to create that companion application that will just follow you throughout life and give you the stimulation and entertainment you need throughout the day, very almost invisibly, just very relaxing, supportive. It's there when you want it. We don't make you log in any particular time of the day or any particular number of hours per day. You just use it when you want it. And we're hoping to take the money we make from this game to develop something closer to like a Ready Player One metaverse. We know something like that is going to be ridiculously expensive. So we're hoping to make a ridiculous amount of money on the first product so that we can, build the technologies that don't exist yet to make that.
I know personally, I would like the industry as a whole to move towards light side technology versus dark side technologies when it comes to microtransactions and stuff like that, because like we just see so many bad examples, or good examples if you would, of dark side technologies where they're just really milking players, psychologically for all their worth, kind of thing. And I mean, being a light side, person myself, like my microtransactions and my monetization model as a whole will look bad, on the surface level, because it's associated with the bad side of the dark, and while things are similar, they're not the same. There's a very big difference between you know giving somebody a parachute and asking if they want to, go skydiving, and shoving somebody without a parachute off the plane. I mean, they're both taking place in a plane high above the sky, but there's a very distinct difference in between them. And, a lot of people, I think, look at it and be like, well, they're both planes in the sky, so they're the same thing. It's like, no, they're not. But like, I really want to, make it clear, that, I think we should, really develop the light side of the thing, and that we should really, as consumers, look and see if the developer is going for the light side approach or the dark side of the approach, and, really support the ones that are going on the light side.
All right. And I think for me, I think is Rats leaving? Oh, wait, see you later, Rats. But for myself, again, as somebody who plays these games, and I think going back to what Seth said earlier, that was not easy for me to get out, that I think we are in this world where long tail design needs to be heavily considered for any game. And again, the games that we have seen that typically go on to keep doing well are the ones that are considering it early in its development. You don't want to be leaving, again, money on the table, especially if you have that game that becomes a breakout hit. With something like Darkest Dungeon, they've released, I think, 3 different expansions? I think 1 for free as well. Grim Dawn has had years of expansions, that was mentioned earlier. And it does raise that question of how many games are really going to be paying attention to the likes of Arknights, to Genshin Impact, to Ramin's game as well in the future. That this idea that you can release a game and it can still earn money as long as you're keeping people invested in it. Like, I still don't believe there is such a thing as, the infinite replayable game. That game that will still be going on, 50, 100 years from now, or things like that. But thank you, Chris, for reminding me of that. That if your game is good and you can keep putting out stuff that elevates it, you can still keep earning money with it. And it's far better to keep supporting a game that people love than, again, starting from scratch with a game that you haven't made yet. And, I think of stuff like Firaxis with XCOM 2, that, the work they put into those expansions with War of the Chosen, it is a fundamentally different game than XCOM 2 was at launch, and I would argue it is a far better game with those additions than the original launch of it. And if we were still just thinking about games as being these one-and-done concepts, we really wouldn't see, I think, the extent of some of the best examples of this kind of design.
Take-Two has been pretty good at trying to really create value for their consumers, I think.
Yeah. But with that said, we are right at an hour and a half, so we will wrap things up here. As always, I'm going to give the Roundtable a chance to plug any projects, anything like that they would like to mention. So we'll once again go with Tomo and work our way around.
Yeah, well, Hyperconnect Studios has got one internal game. It is called Epic Tavern. It is available on early access on Steam still. We are hoping of getting out of there sometime early next year. And additionally, there will be a comic book released inspired by the same world and many of the same characters late in October as well.
All right. Over to Seth.
So I've got the strategyinformer.com where I do the reviews and previews and stuff. We're a little light on content right now because I've been actually redesigning the site. It took off really well, and I've needed to solidify some things. But we're starting to write again for it, and I'm working with some indie developers. So if you're looking for people to come on as contractors, contact me. I do part-time work for indies. And you said plug, so I might as well, right? And if you go to the website, you can find my Twitter, or you can look at the down below the video. My Twitter's on there. That's where I do a lot of my communication.
All right. Ramin?
Well, we just came out of stealth. We've changed our name to Eravant, and our game name is Star Garden. We just did the initial reveal of some of the basic information about the game, but it's an extremely complex game. So we're just going to be trickling out information about it slowly over time. But updates should be coming very rapidly now, especially now we have our Discord up and we're engaging with the community.
Okay.
And I'm currently working on Neon Continuum, which is a good base CCG, and it's hard to tell you where we're at in development because it's sort of a mixed bag. Code has lagged behind for so long, but we're playtesting on our Discord once a month, if not more often, kind of thing. So if you want to check it out, it's come and join our Discord. Link should be down in the description.
All right, and for me, obviously, I have the Game Wisdom YouTube channel, which I hope everyone watching this is subscribe, liking, doing all that other great stuff. We are knocking on 8,000 subscribers with the goal, of course, to hit the magical 10,000 in the near future. You can follow me on Twitter at GW Bycer, and be sure to pick up my books on design, the Game Design Deep Dive series, and 20 Essential Games to Study. Book number 4, All About Horror, is coming out on October 8th, and then book number 5 on free-to-play design, that is coming out sometime in 2022, because I haven't written it yet, so I need to get going on that. All right, well, everybody, thank you so much for coming out. We try to plan to do these once a month. If you'd like to suggest a topic for a future roundtable, let us know in the comments. But again, do the liking and subscribing. Follow everybody. Links are all in the description. But gentlemen, thanks again for coming out. And thank you, Seth, for your first time on.
Yay! Look forward to more. I had a blast.
All right, and thank you, Chris, for that mention. Yes, everyone, spread the word. Do all the social media stuff that I need to get going on my end as well. All right.
It was fun having Seth on. He's been in the gaming industry for like 25 plus years. So.
All right. Well, everyone, have a great rest of your night. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. Until our next roundtable. Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks all. Pleasure as always.
Take care, guys.
Bye, gentlemen.
Bye.